The lights inside the Cipriani Ballroom in New York shimmered like liquid gold that night. It was October 10th, and the air inside the grand venue felt thick with expectation. Project Healthy Minds, the mental health nonprofit founded on ideals of empathy and awareness, had promised a celebration unlike any other. A glittering evening that merged celebrity influence with philanthropy's noble heart. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And at the center of it all stood two of the most talked about figures in the world, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. They arrived with the kind of magnetic presence that both draws and divides a crowd. Cameras flashed in rapid bursts, the hum of reporters shouting questions echoing against the marble columns. Meghan, draped in a form-fitting golden gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, smiled for the cameras with the trained precision of someone who understood exactly how much power a single image could carry. Beside her, Prince Harry looked polished yet uneasy, his hand briefly brushing hers before he pulled it away, his smile momentarily faltering before returning under the weight of flashing bulbs. The Project Healthy Minds Gala was meant to be a night of celebration, an acknowledgement of those using their platforms to advance mental health causes. For Harry and Meghan, the Humanitarians of the Year award was more than a trophy. It was vindication. After years of controversy, public backlash, and tabloid wars, the Sussexes had found themselves back in front of the cameras. But this time, in the name of compassion. For the organization, having them on stage was a publicity dream. Royal recognition, global attention, and a narrative that seemed to align perfectly with their mission of destigmatizing mental health conversations. But what the cameras didn't capture during the red carpet smiles was the underlying tension that had been brewing for weeks. Whispers inside Project Healthy Minds suggested that preparations for the event had been unusually complicated. Meghan's team reportedly made last-minute demands about stage lighting, camera angles, and how she and Harry should be introduced. Behind the polished smiles of the PR staff, there were sighs of exhaustion and whispered frustrations. For CEO Phil Shermer, the man behind Project Healthy Minds, this gala represented months of delicate coordination, and the pressure to make everything flawless was immense. As the guests took their seats, the atmosphere was charged. Journalists from across the country were present, eager to document the couple's first major public appearance since their controversial Netflix series. There was laughter, applause, and an undercurrent of curiosity. What tone would Meghan strike tonight? Would Harry speak freely about his mental health advocacy? Or would this evening be another carefully managed spectacle? When the couple finally stepped onto the stage, the applause was immediate but not thunderous. Meghan's poise was unmistakable. She clasped the microphone and began her speech with grace and precision, thanking the organization for its dedication to creating spaces where people feel seen, heard, and valued. Her words, on the surface, carried sincerity. But to some in the audience, there was a noticeable tension between the message and the delivery. Her tone was powerful but sharp, her body language commanding yet impatient. Prince Harry followed with a more subdued speech, earnest, emotional, but occasionally hesitant. His words about mental resilience and shared humanity drew polite applause, though not the thunderous reception one might expect from such a high-profile couple. After the applause faded, the evening shifted into its quieter phase. The dinner, the mingling, the smiles exchanged between tables of celebrities, donors, and mental health advocates. It was during these softer moments that the event's tone began to subtly shift. Several attendees later recalled that Meghan appeared distracted and visibly tense. While some assumed it was exhaustion, others noticed that her staff seemed unusually alert, whispering to one another as they kept glancing toward the organizer's table where Phil Shermer sat. For Shermer, the night should have been one of triumph. His nonprofit had just hosted global icons, ensuring unprecedented visibility. Yet as the evening wore on, he appeared increasingly distant. According to multiple attendees, Shermer was informed of a behind-the-scenes disagreement involving Meghan's team. Details remain murky, but sources close to the event later claimed that Meghan had been displeased with how the stage lighting had made her appear in photographs during the award presentation. Another report suggested that she was furious that her speech had been slightly delayed, due to a timing miscommunication by the production team. Whatever the spark was, the tension carried into the night's end. When most guests had begun to leave, Meghan and Harry reportedly remained in a private lounge area backstage, surrounded by their aides. Shermer, still managing cleanup operations and post-event interviews, eventually made his way toward that section to thank the couple personally for attending. What happened next would later become one of the most talked-about scandals in the event's history. Footage, later leaked online, appeared to show Meghan standing face-to-face with Phil Shermer in a heated exchange. Though the audio was partially muted, witnesses claimed her voice could be heard rising sharply as she gestured toward the stage direction area. Harry stood slightly behind her, arms folded, expression unreadable. Staff members nearby looked frozen, some turning away, others attempting to de-escalate. Shermer, composed but visibly uncomfortable, appeared to respond calmly before stepping back and signaling to someone off-camera. Within hours, snippets of the footage appeared on anonymous social media accounts. The caption was simple: Meghan Markle yelling at Project Healthy Minds CEO backstage. The video went viral within minutes, shared across every major platform. Some users dismissed it as a doctored clip meant to tarnish Meghan's image. Others were convinced it was genuine, pointing out the identical outfits, backdrop, and camera angles from earlier official coverage. The following morning, Project Healthy Minds found itself at the center of a storm. Journalists flooded the organization's inbox, demanding confirmation or denial. The board convened an emergency meeting. Donors expressed concern. What was meant to be a night celebrating mental health awareness had spiraled into a global controversy about power, celebrity, and control. The introduction of that footage marked a turning point. It wasn't just about Meghan's alleged outburst. It was about what it represented. To critics, it symbolized the hypocrisy of public compassion paired with private volatility. To supporters, it was evidence of yet another media trap set against a woman constantly vilified for her emotions. To Project Healthy Minds, it was a nightmare, an incident that threatened to overshadow years of hard-earned credibility. Even more unsettling was what came next. Just days after the footage leaked, an anonymous statement, allegedly from someone inside the organization, hinted that the video had come from internal security archives. That meant the leak hadn't originated from a journalist or an outsider. It had come from within. The finger of speculation turned toward Phil Shermer himself. Could the CEO of a globally respected mental health charity have leaked private footage of a guest to the media? And if so, why? That question ignited an entirely new debate. Some believed Shermer had done it in frustration, perhaps tired of celebrity entitlement overshadowing the cause. Others suggested it was retaliation, a preemptive defense against accusations Meghan might have made privately about the event's management. Either way, the leak reshaped the public narrative. What began as a glamorous night of recognition had transformed into an ethical and reputational battle. From a storytelling perspective, this was no ordinary scandal. It was layered with irony. The event designed to promote mental wellness had instead exposed mental strain, professional exhaustion, and fractured egos. The couple hailed as humanitarians found themselves accused of hostility. The CEO who championed empathy became the face of betrayal. The public, watching from their screens, couldn't look away. Every frame of that leaked footage became a new headline, every freeze frame analyzed for microexpressions. Was Meghan's anger justified? Did Shermer provoke her? Why did Harry stay silent? Each question deepened the intrigue, turning an already complex story into a psychological and moral labyrinth. By the end of that week, Project Healthy Minds' social media pages had been flooded, some demanding accountability, others expressing disbelief. The charity's official statement, carefully worded, expressed regret over recent misunderstandings, without confirming or denying the authenticity of the footage. That ambiguity only fueled the fire. Meanwhile, royal commentators seized the opportunity to link the incident to a broader pattern. They recalled moments from past public appearances where Meghan appeared frustrated or controlling, and moments where Harry seemed withdrawn. The narrative expanded beyond the gala. It became another chapter in the ongoing saga of the Sussexes' relationship with institutions, authority, and the press. But beyond the noise, one simple truth lingered. Something had happened backstage that night, something powerful enough to fracture the illusion of harmony that both sides had tried so hard to project. The Project Healthy Minds Gala was supposed to be a symbol of healing, but it had become a mirror reflecting everything modern celebrity philanthropy tries to hide: the politics, the egos, the tension between authenticity and image. As the story unfolded, the world would soon realize that what began as a glittering awards ceremony had evolved into a test of credibility. For Meghan, for Harry, and for Project Healthy Minds itself. And at the heart of it all stood one unanswered question: who leaked the footage? Project Healthy Minds began not in a boardroom but in the quiet despair of a generation drowning in digital noise. Its founder, Phil Shermer, was not a royal, not a movie star, and not a politician. He was a man who had seen too many friends crumble under the invisible weight of anxiety and self-doubt while the world applauded the image of success. He built his nonprofit on a simple but radical premise: to make mental health support as visible and accessible as ordering a coffee on your phone. That ideal carried him through years of obstacles, until it grew into a movement recognized by corporations, universities, and eventually, celebrities. In the early days, Shermer spoke about mental health in the language of startups. He called it a human tech challenge, where awareness was not enough. There had to be structure, resources, and a culture of openness. Slowly, Project Healthy Minds built partnerships with brands and foundations that wanted to wear social responsibility like a badge. From small community panels to glittering fundraisers, it transformed from an idea whispered in college seminars into a recognized national platform. By 2025, its name had become synonymous with modern philanthropy, a perfect blend of corporate efficiency and emotional appeal. Yet beneath the polished image of this growing nonprofit lay the same tensions that haunt many high-profile organizations. The more attention it gained, the more pressure there was to deliver perfection. Shermer, once seen as an approachable visionary, began to face the kind of scrutiny reserved for public figures. Each donor wanted influence, each partnership demanded visibility, and each celebrity involvement brought the double-edged sword of fame. It was within that swirl of ambition and image management that the gala idea was born. The World Mental Health Day Gala was meant to be a statement. Not just an event, but an emblem of what could happen when wealth, influence, and compassion met under one roof. The third annual gala had been planned for months, long before Meghan Markle and Prince Harry agreed to attend. Their inclusion was a masterstroke. From a marketing perspective, it guaranteed coverage. From a mission standpoint, it seemed symbolic: two people who had publicly discussed mental health, speaking to an audience about healing and empathy. But internally, it created unease. For Shermer and his team, working with the Sussexes meant navigating not only celebrity expectations but also royal protocol. Meghan's team of advisors was large, detail-oriented, and demanding. They wanted control over how she would be presented, the sequence of the event, and even the visual narrative of the evening. To some staffers, it felt less like a partnership and more like a negotiation of power. Yet Shermer, pragmatic and forward-thinking, believed that the end justified the means. The attention their presence would bring could fund new programs and attract younger audiences. Weeks before the gala, subtle cracks began to show. Emails between the event planners and Meghan's representatives reportedly reflected growing tension. There were disagreements over promotional materials. Should the gala focus on the charity's mission or on the star guests? The PR team pushed for balance, but Meghan's camp emphasized prominence. To the outside world, these were minor details. To those organizing the event, they were the seeds of something larger. A collision between two brands fighting for control of the same spotlight. When October arrived, the pressure reached its peak. Shermer spent nights reviewing guest lists and final rehearsals, obsessing over flow and timing. He knew this event would be watched by media across continents. He also knew that Meghan and Harry were not just guests. They were the event's gravitational center. Every camera angle, every mention, every headline would orbit them. He had hoped that their advocacy for mental health would align seamlessly with his organization's goals. But privately, he worried about the cost of that alignment. As the doors opened to the Cipriani ballroom, the staff operated with mechanical precision. Security personnel had been briefed for weeks, publicists rehearsed talking points, and photographers had been assigned zones. The grandeur of the venue, a mix of old-world New York charm and modern lighting, reflected the dual identity of the gala. Tradition meeting spectacle. Shermer, moving quietly through the crowd in his dark suit, shook hands, exchanged smiles, and hid his exhaustion behind practiced composure. For him, this wasn't just a celebration of mental health advocacy. It was a test of endurance and image management. The decision to honor Prince Harry and Meghan Markle with the Humanitarians of the Year award had been announced months earlier. It sparked a wave of attention, both positive and critical. Supporters praised the choice, saying it brought visibility to global mental health issues. Critics argued it was a publicity maneuver that overshadowed smaller, more grassroots advocates. Shermer had brushed off the criticism. In his mind, any awareness was good awareness. But in the final days leading up to the gala, he began to feel the weight of expectation pressing on him like never before. Inside Project Healthy Minds, there was unspoken tension among staff. Some felt their core mission was being diluted by celebrity involvement. They worried that the focus had shifted from community-driven support to high-profile branding. Others were simply overworked, dealing with last-minute logistical changes from Meghan's team, special seating arrangements, lighting tests, custom introductions. The nonprofit's social media director confided to a colleague that it felt more like preparing for a Hollywood premiere than a charity event. Still, everyone pushed forward, driven by the hope that the night would end in triumph. As Shermer finalized his remarks for the evening, he reflected on how far his organization had come. He remembered hosting small gatherings in university halls, where attendees brought their own chairs and snacks. Now, he was standing on the brink of global attention. Yet he couldn't shake the sense that the event was no longer entirely his. The cause had taken a back seat to celebrity management, and every moment felt choreographed for cameras rather than genuine connection. Even so, he convinced himself that this was the price of progress. If celebrity visibility could save lives by breaking stigma, perhaps the compromises were worth it. He had built his organization on collaboration, and he saw this as an extension of that mission. What he could not predict, however, was that the same visibility he sought would soon expose his organization to a crisis unlike any it had faced before. That evening, as the first guests arrived, Shermer's face betrayed none of his anxiety. He welcomed donors, greeted attendees, and spoke about the importance of compassion in leadership. He had worked tirelessly to ensure every table, every speech, every camera was in place. Yet, as the Sussexes made their entrance, something in the air shifted. The energy became taut, focused entirely on them. It was no longer Project Healthy Minds night. It was their night. And Shermer, though smiling, understood that his role had subtly changed from host to supporting act. Behind the scenes, staff members whispered about Meghan's insistence on reviewing certain camera placements moments before the event began. She wanted to ensure her best angle would be captured when she accepted the award. The production crew, already on edge, scrambled to adjust. Shermer, informed of the request, hesitated but ultimately agreed. He told his assistant, "If this keeps things smooth, let it be done." It was a small concession, but in hindsight, it represented the beginning of a loss of control that would ripple through the organization. The gala's first hour unfolded smoothly enough. The speakers delivered heartfelt messages. The performances evoked applause, and the mood remained upbeat. But for Shermer, each moment was underscored by the awareness that his creation had transformed into a stage for others. He watched as cameras followed Meghan and Harry through every interaction, every polite laugh, every whispered conversation. His own speech, once the centerpiece of the event, was barely noticed. The spotlight had moved on, and though he understood why, something in him began to resent it. In that sense, the gala was more than a fundraiser. It was a reflection of the modern philanthropic dilemma. Charities no longer thrived solely on good intentions. They depended on influence, optics, and narrative control. Shermer had built his nonprofit to bridge worlds, but those worlds were now colliding. On one side stood genuine advocates and mental health experts who valued substance. On the other stood powerful figures who measured success by visibility. As the night reached its midpoint, Shermer slipped into a quiet corridor to catch his breath. He glanced through the curtains at the sea of glittering gowns and tuxedos, the journalists taking notes, the influencers live-streaming snippets of the event. For a brief moment, he felt detached, as though he were observing his own creation from the outside. In that reflection, he realized that the story being told inside that ballroom wasn't entirely his anymore. It belonged to the guests, the audience, the celebrities, and to the scrutiny of a watching world. This was the foundation of the storm that would later engulf him. The Project Healthy Minds Gala had begun as an act of empathy, but it had evolved into a spectacle of perception. Phil Shermer's mission to normalize conversations about mental health was now entangled with the politics of image and influence. He understood the irony, though he could not yet foresee its consequences. By the time the final preparations ended that night, Shermer had given everything to ensure perfection. Every detail was in place, every word rehearsed, every camera ready. But perfection is fragile, and in a room filled with powerful egos and fragile reputations, all it takes is one spark to set the structure ablaze. The next day's headlines would not speak of Project Healthy Minds' triumph or of the funds raised for mental health awareness. Instead, they would echo a question that would haunt the organization. How did a mission built on healing become a story of conflict and control? The rise of Project Healthy Minds had been remarkable, a testament to vision and persistence. But its third gala would reveal an uncomfortable truth. When causes meet celebrity culture, the line between advocacy and spectacle becomes dangerously thin. That thin line was about to snap, and when it did, the fallout would not only challenge the integrity of the organization but also test the boundaries of what modern philanthropy could endure. The moment Harry and Meghan stepped out of the sleek black SUV that pulled up outside Cipriani's grand entrance, the night changed tone. Flashbulbs exploded in quick succession, painting the marble facade with frantic bursts of white light. The air was sharp with October chill, but the crowd outside was fevered. Paparazzi shouting questions, onlookers waving smartphones, and reporters jostling to capture a glimpse of the couple whose every movement seemed to fuel both fascination and outrage. For the guests already inside, the arrival of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex was the climax of anticipation. The murmurs that had filled the ballroom quieted as word spread that they had arrived. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm, a collective breath held by hundreds of people waiting for the spectacle to begin. Inside, staff moved with precision, adjusting lighting and cueing the music that would play during their entrance. Every detail had been planned for weeks, but the sense of unease from the planning phase had not vanished. Meghan stepped onto the carpet first, her hand gracefully lifting the hem of her gown as photographers shouted her name. The dress shimmered under the camera lights, a deep metallic hue designed to catch attention from every angle. Her smile was rehearsed but radiant, her chin slightly lifted in that familiar expression of control and confidence. Beside her, Harry managed a polite nod toward the crowd, his demeanor polite but distant. He wore a classic black tuxedo, tailored and immaculate, yet his expression betrayed a weariness that even the cameras couldn't conceal. They posed together briefly for the photographers, standing closer than they had in months of public appearances. Meghan leaned slightly toward him, whispering something that made him straighten his back and offer a practiced smile. To those watching, it looked natural enough, but to anyone who had studied their interactions over the years, it was a quiet negotiation. A momentary alignment of two public figures who understood that unity, even when strained, played better under the lights. Inside the ballroom, the guests stood in applause as the couple entered. The MC's voice rang out, announcing their arrival with grand enthusiasm, while the orchestra played a soft, elegant arrangement in the background. Meghan's gaze swept across the crowd, scanning the tables filled with donors, executives, and mental health advocates. Her composure was impeccable. Yet to those seated closest to the stage, there was something guarded in her eyes, a hint of restlessness, as though she was both performer and critic in her own show. Phil Shermer, stationed near the stage, extended his hand as they approached. The handshake was brief but courteous. Cameras captured the moment, Shermer's professional smile, Meghan's poised nod, Harry's half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. For a fleeting second, it seemed as though the evening might proceed without friction. But the smallest details hinted at tension. Meghan glanced toward the photographers positioned at the back of the room, her brow tightening before she leaned to whisper something to an aide. Within minutes, 2 event staff discreetly moved the camera setup by a few inches, prompting quiet confusion among the technical team. As the couple took their seats at the front table, conversation resumed across the room. Some guests whispered about how effortlessly Meghan commanded attention. Others noted how Harry seemed detached, fiddling with the napkin in his lap or looking around rather than engaging in the lively chatter surrounding him. A journalist seated a few tables away would later describe it as a picture-perfect scene filled with invisible tension. The gala's opening speeches began shortly afterward. One by one, advocates and sponsors took the stage, praising the importance of mental health awareness. The atmosphere was polished yet mechanical, an event running smoothly on the surface but weighted by something unspoken underneath. When it was finally time to announce the humanitarians of the year, the MC's tone swelled with rehearsed admiration. The crowd clapped enthusiastically, though not everyone was fully invested. For many attendees, this was a night of networking as much as celebration, and the Sussex's presence was both spectacle and statement. As Harry and Meghan rose from their seats, photographers gathered at the foot of the stage. Meghan took the lead, ascending the steps with the grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Her movements were elegant, deliberate, but sharp around the edges, every gesture calibrated for effect. Harry followed a step behind, pausing briefly to adjust his jacket. When they reached the podium, she accepted the award with a serene smile, holding it up for the cameras while the audience applauded. Meghan began her speech. Her voice was calm, commanding, and meticulously paced. She spoke about compassion, about the responsibility of those with influence to use their platforms for good, and about the importance of removing stigma around mental health. Her words were well-constructed, the kind that fit perfectly into headlines. Yet beneath the surface, something about the delivery felt strained, too precise, too polished. For some in the room, it sounded more like a performance than a confession. Harry took the microphone next. His tone was more vulnerable, his pacing more natural. He spoke of personal struggles, of seeking help when the world expected strength. The audience responded warmly, though the applause came in waves rather than thunder. As he spoke, Meghan watched him closely, occasionally nodding, occasionally glancing toward the cameras. Her attention seemed divided, half on her husband's words, half on the optics of the moment. When the speeches ended, the applause was respectful but subdued. The couple stepped away from the podium, smiling for photographs with Shermer and several donors. The pictures, later distributed by media outlets, would capture a moment of unity. 3 figures standing side by side, smiling into the flash of history. But those who were there remembered a different image. Meghan lowering the award too quickly, Harry whispering something under his breath, and Shermer's fixed smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As the evening transitioned into the dinner hour, the gala's energy began to fragment. Guests circulated, clinking glasses, discussing speeches, exchanging polite compliments. Meghan and Harry remained at their table, occasionally greeting visitors who approached to offer congratulations. Meghan's smile remained radiant, yet her posture stiffened each time a camera hovered too long. Harry, meanwhile, seemed to withdraw further into himself. When a reporter asked him about future collaborations with the charity, he offered a vague nod and a non-committal answer. For Shermer, moving between tables to thank donors, the mood was complex. On one hand, the event was visually flawless. On the other, he could sense an imbalance, an emotional distance between the night's message and the way it was being received. He had envisioned this gala as a conversation about collective healing. Instead, it felt like an elaborate performance where sincerity was replaced by choreography. At one point during the dinner, A brief exchange between Meghan and a member of the organizing staff caught attention. She leaned forward sharply, her expression tightening as she gestured toward a display screen that projected photos from earlier in the evening. A few guests noticed her lips form the words, "That's not the approved shot." Within moments, the image on the screen shifted to a different photo. Most people assumed it was a harmless correction. But to those near her, the tension was palpable. Harry looked away, avoiding her gaze as the staffer nodded nervously and hurried off. Small moments like these defined the rest of the evening. Fleeting but charged. Every smile, every whisper carried undercurrents. Meghan's staff hovered nearby, adjusting, coordinating, monitoring. Shermer's team tried to maintain calm, though several volunteers later admitted that the atmosphere backstage was uneasy. The couple's presence, while powerful, had become heavy. What was supposed to be a partnership now felt like a delicate balancing act between two entities: the charity's mission and the Sussex's image. As the final segment of the evening approached, Shermer took the stage to offer closing remarks. His speech was concise, heartfelt, and sincere, focusing on the importance of sustained effort beyond one night's glamour. He thanked the attendees for their generosity and spoke of the growing need for honest dialogue about mental health. As he spoke, Meghan maintained her smile, nodding occasionally. But when Shermer mentioned the courage of all who work quietly behind the scenes, a few witnesses claimed to notice a fleeting expression cross her face, a momentary tightening of her jaw, as if the words struck a hidden nerve. When the applause faded and the lights dimmed, the evening appeared to end smoothly. Guests began to depart, some stopping to take last-minute photos with the couple. Meghan and Harry posed graciously, but there was no mistaking their exhaustion. Shermer, relieved yet restless, approached them to thank them once again for attending. The exchange was polite, even warm, but it carried an undertone of distance, a formal civility masking something unsettled. Later, when the ballroom emptied and the cleanup began, staff members spoke quietly about the night. Some described it as a success. Others called it strange or tense. But all agreed on one point: the atmosphere around the Sussexes had felt electric, as if any small misstep could ignite something larger. None of them could have guessed that before dawn, that electricity would manifest in the form of a leaked recording. The couple's arrival had been designed to symbolize glamour and purpose, a union of fame and charity. But beneath the gleam of that evening, the cracks had already begun to form. Meghan's meticulous control over optics, Harry's quiet discomfort, and Shermer's suppressed frustration all converged in those few hours. The gala, which was meant to showcase collective compassion, had instead exposed the unspoken friction between intention and ego. By the time the last guest left the ballroom, the air was heavy with exhaustion. Shermer stood alone near the stage, watching his staff dismantle the decorations. The music had stopped, the lights dimmed, and the echoes of applause faded into silence. Somewhere in that silence, he sensed that the night's story wasn't over. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the real drama, the one that would unravel reputations and redefine alliances, was just beginning. I have reached the end of this section at around 2,000 words. Please say go when you are ready for the next section, the award moment, Humanitarians of the Year. The moment the MC's voice echoed through the ballroom announcing the next segment of the evening, a hush swept across the tables. It was time for the highlight of the gala, the presentation of the Humanitarians of the Year award. The lights dimmed slightly, bathing the vast hall in a warm golden hue. The orchestra shifted tone, moving into a slow, uplifting instrumental. The screens around the room flickered to life, displaying images of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's philanthropic endeavors, their trips to community centers, interviews about mental health, and carefully curated shots of compassion and advocacy. The narrative projected on those screens was immaculate. It told the story of two public figures who had weathered storms, overcome scrutiny, and redefined what it meant to be royal in the modern era. It was emotional, even inspiring. Guests watched attentively, some leaning in, others recording clips for social media. But in the quiet corners of the room, not everyone was convinced. There were subtle murmurs from attendees who had followed the couple's controversies over the years. To some, this moment felt too polished, too calculated. As the video ended, the applause rose. Phil Shermer took the stage, smiling with the calm precision of a man who understood the stakes of every word he was about to speak. He began with a brief reflection on the organization's mission, then transitioned seamlessly into praise for the couple. His voice was steady, his gestures confident. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, he said, have used their platform to shed light on one of the most pressing issues of our time, the importance of mental health and emotional well-being. The crowd clapped again, a wave of polite acknowledgement rather than overwhelming enthusiasm. The couple stood up from their table, hand in hand, as cameras clicked in unison. Meghan's posture was impeccable. Harry's expression was thoughtful, even solemn. They walked toward the stage slowly, accompanied by music and a flood of camera flashes. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The symbolism was powerful. The former senior royals walking toward recognition in a space far removed from Buckingham Palace, yet no less grand. When they reached the podium, Shermer extended the glass award to Meghan first. She accepted it with a gracious smile, thanking him quietly before turning to face the crowd. Harry followed, shaking Shermer's hand with a faint nod. The audience applauded again, though the clapping was uneven, scattered with pauses. A few guests whistled, trying to fill the gaps of hesitation. Meghan began speaking first. Her voice, amplified across the vast ballroom, was clear and commanding. She thanked the organization for its dedication to destigmatizing mental health, emphasizing how important it was for every person to feel seen, valued, and understood. Her tone was warm but assertive, the cadence carefully modulated for effect. She glanced occasionally toward the cameras positioned along the sides of the stage, making sure every angle captured her sincerity. She spoke of empathy and service, of breaking silence around suffering, of her journey from actress to advocate. It was eloquent and moving, yet something about her delivery carried an edge, a faint tension in her pauses, a tightening in her jaw when the applause did not rise as strongly as expected. The words flowed flawlessly, but the emotion behind them felt restrained, as if each sentence had been measured for precision rather than heart. When Harry took the microphone, the contrast was immediate. His voice was lower, more vulnerable, his tone less rehearsed. He began by acknowledging the struggles that had shaped his own understanding of mental health, the pressures of expectation, the pain of grief, and the need for connection. The audience responded more naturally to him. There was an authenticity in his hesitations, in the way his words stumbled slightly before finding rhythm again. He spoke about how society often praises strength but rarely honors honesty. He thanked Project Healthy Minds for creating a space where people can speak their truth without fear of judgment. His words carried weight, yet his eyes occasionally drifted toward Meghan, who stood beside him, smiling with composure but maintaining an almost theatrical stillness. It was as if she had locked herself into a public role she couldn't abandon mid-performance. When Harry concluded his remarks, the applause was again polite but restrained. The room was filled with admiration, but it wasn't the roaring approval they might have expected. There were people clapping enthusiastically, yes, but many others simply watched, some lost in thought, others whispering quietly. Shermer stepped forward again to congratulate them, and photographers rushed closer, their flashes reflecting off the glass award like lightning. For a few moments, the stage was chaos. Camera clicks, shouted directions, and overlapping smiles frozen in half-real expressions. Meghan adjusted her posture subtly, turning her shoulder toward the brighter lights, ensuring that her profile faced the most prominent camera. Harry leaned slightly away, his eyes unfocused for a brief second, as if his mind had drifted elsewhere. The photographers eventually pulled back, and the trio posed for one final shot, Shermer between the two, Meghan's hand lightly on the award, Harry's arm loosely behind her back. It was the image that would dominate headlines the next morning. To those outside the room, it looked perfect. The power couple smiling with dignity, the CEO beaming with pride, the symbol of humanitarian grace captured forever. But for those who stood a few feet away, the illusion faltered. Meghan's smile didn't reach her eyes, and Shermer's jaw was tense. After the formal segment, the couple was escorted to a side area for a brief press interaction. A journalist asked Meghan what the award meant to her. Her response was smooth. "It's a reminder that kindness is not just an idea, it's action." Harry added softly, "It's about community." The exchange lasted less than 2 minutes, but those nearby noticed that the energy between them had shifted. The closeness they displayed on stage now felt strained, as if exhaustion and unease had replaced the earlier performance of unity. Meanwhile, in the back of the room, Shermer stood quietly with a small group of organizers. He looked at the crowd, at the flashes of light bouncing across the chandeliers, and exhaled. His colleagues congratulated him, saying the event had gone beautifully. But he didn't smile. He sensed what few others did, that the evening's success was built on fragile foundations. There had been too many tense moments, too many subtle exchanges, and too much quiet irritation hidden behind perfect posture. As the guests transitioned to dinner, Shermer's assistant approached him with a concerned look. One of Meghan's aides had requested that certain photographs from the presentation not be distributed until they had been reviewed by her communications team. Shermer frowned but nodded. "Make sure it's handled diplomatically," he said. He had learned long ago that celebrity partnerships required compromise. Still, something about the demand unsettled him. The awkward goodbyes, the strained smiles, the subtle irritation, all the small cracks that had gone unnoticed by most that night, would soon become evidence in a much larger narrative. Within 48 hours, the footage of Meghan Markle allegedly yelling backstage at Phil Shermer would surface online, igniting a global storm that none of them could contain. But that night, as the last members of the staff left and the lights dimmed for good, Shermer remained seated in silence. He stared at the stage where hours earlier, he had stood beside two of the world's most famous people, smiling for cameras that captured everything except the truth. For him, the gala was over. For the world, the story was just beginning. "I have reached the end of this section at around 2,000 words. Please say go when you are ready for the next section." The leaked footage scandal unfolds. It began quietly, an anonymous upload on a small, unverified account. The clip was only 43 seconds long, grainy, and slightly tilted, as though recorded from a security feed. It showed a private corridor, dimly lit, lined with black drapes and silver stanchions. At the far end, 3 figures stood in tense proximity. One was unmistakably Meghan Markle, the other Prince Harry, and the third, though partly obscured, was Phil Shermer. At first, it seemed routine, a conversation after the gala, perhaps a logistical discussion. But then Meghan's posture changed. Her shoulders squared, her gestures sharpened, and her mouth began to move in rapid bursts. Even without clear audio, her tone was evident. What had started as an exchange shifted into confrontation. She pointed toward something off-screen, then toward Shermer. The CEO stood with hands slightly raised, calm but defensive. Harry lingered at her side, expression taut, eyes downcast. The audio kicked in halfway through, faint but clear enough to hear fragments. "That wasn't the agreement. We discussed this already. You said you'd ensure it was handled properly." Shermer's reply, quieter, was difficult to discern. Something about technical limitations and timing. Meghan's tone sharpened. "This isn't acceptable. It reflects poorly on us." Her hand sliced through the air for emphasis. The clip ended abruptly, the frame freezing on Meghan's face mid-sentence. Within minutes of appearing online, it began to spread. It first circulated on niche gossip forums before leaping onto major social platforms. By dawn, it had amassed hundreds of thousands of views. By noon, millions. The caption varied depending on where it was shared. Some called it Meghan versus the CEO. Others backstage blow-up at mental health gala. The reactions came fast. Supporters defended her instantly, claiming the clip had been edited to portray her unfairly. Critics saw it as proof of arrogance and hypocrisy. The comments section on nearly every major platform filled with arguments. Some accused Project Healthy Minds of leaking the footage intentionally for attention. Others insisted Meghan's team was being sabotaged from within. Hashtags like hashtag Project Healthy Minds and hashtag Meghan Backstage trended simultaneously across platforms. Phil Shermer woke to dozens of missed calls. His communications director's voice trembled when she finally reached him. The video's everywhere, Phil. I don't know how it leaked, but it's bad. Within hours, his inbox flooded with media requests. Every outlet wanted a comment. Some framed the leak as a breach of privacy. Others demanded to know if it was authentic. Shermer's initial instinct was disbelief. The footage came from internal security archives, restricted access. Only a handful of people could have retrieved it. He felt his stomach sink as the implications settled in. Meanwhile, at the Sussex's residence in California, the reaction was equally frantic. Meghan's PR team had been caught off guard. The official channels had prepared for glowing coverage of their gala appearance. Instead, they faced a viral scandal. Within minutes, crisis meetings began. Calls were placed to legal advisors, and publicists drafted responses emphasizing context manipulation and inaccurate portrayal. But the footage was already out of control. Every attempt to contain it seemed to amplify curiosity. For the first 12 hours, neither side made a public statement. The silence only intensified speculation. Commentators dissected every second of the clip. Professional body language analysts appeared on morning shows, interpreting Meghan's movements, her hand gestures, her tone, the tension in Harry's stance. Some concluded that she appeared assertive but frustrated. Others described it as domineering. Harry's passive presence became another focal point. Online audiences debated whether his silence was loyalty or embarrassment. By the afternoon, mainstream media had joined in. Major networks replayed the clip during news segments, juxtaposing it with footage from the couple's onstage acceptance. The contrast was striking. On stage, Meghan's voice had been smooth and compassionate. Backstage, it was sharp and unyielding. The headlines wrote themselves. From grace to grit, leaked footage raises questions about Duchess's behavior. Inside Project Healthy Minds, panic met confusion. Shermer's staff demanded an internal investigation. One faction urged immediate denial. Another advised transparency. The communications team drafted multiple versions of a statement, each softer than the last. By early evening, Shermer made the decision to acknowledge the incident without admitting responsibility. The statement read, "Project Healthy Minds is aware of an unauthorized release of internal security footage. We deeply regret this breach of privacy and are reviewing the matter. We remain committed to our mission of mental wellness and integrity." It was intended as neutral damage control, but it only deepened public intrigue. If the footage was authentic, why didn't they deny it? And if it was unauthorized, who had leaked it? Some accused Shermer directly, suggesting he had leaked it himself in retaliation for the alleged argument. Others claimed a disgruntled staffer had done it, frustrated by the growing influence of celebrity culture within the charity. At the same time, Meghan's representatives released their own statement. It described the footage as misleadingly edited, claiming it removed key context that fundamentally altered the tone and nature of the exchange. They characterized Meghan's words as a professional discussion about logistical issues that arose during a complex live event. The statement ended with an admonishment about privacy and ethical responsibility. But the internet thrives on ambiguity. The absence of full context only invited more speculation. Analysts slowed the clip frame by frame, speculating about every glance and gesture. They highlighted Harry's folded arms, Shermer's steady stillness, Meghan's pointed hand movements. Each freeze frame became evidence of something larger: frustration, control, power imbalance, disrespect. For Shermer, the fallout was immediate. Donors called with concerns. One corporate partner requested reassurance that their name wouldn't be dragged into a controversy. The board of directors held an emergency meeting to discuss damage limitation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A mental health charity was now the epicenter of a public scandal fueled by anxiety, anger, and online hysteria. As the day unfolded, more versions of the clip appeared. One account released an extended version showing an extra 10 seconds before the argument began. In those seconds, Meghan could be seen approaching Shermer calmly, apparently referencing a phone in her hand, possibly showing him something. The discovery only deepened confusion. What had she been showing him? Was it a photo, a message, or a stage cue error? Theories multiplied faster than facts. Journalists began digging. Sources within Project Healthy Minds, speaking anonymously, claimed there had been several disagreements during the planning stages. One insider told a reporter that Meghan's team had been highly particular about presentation details, and that the CEO felt pressured to meet impossible demands. Another countered, saying Shermer had been unresponsive to last-minute adjustments that were important for the couple's image. The narrative split in two. In one version, Meghan was portrayed as a demanding celebrity berating a nonprofit leader for minor issues. In the other, she was a professional woman defending herself against organizational mismanagement. Both versions circulated widely, each attracting its own loyal defenders. Harry's silence became another thread. While Meghan's team battled the press, Harry remained quiet. He was photographed leaving a private appointment 2 days later, looking tired and avoiding questions. Online commentators read meaning into every expression. "He looks embarrassed," one headline said. "He's supporting her privately," claimed another. In the midst of the chaos, Shermer convened his senior team in the charity's Manhattan office. The atmosphere was heavy. No one had slept. "We need to find out who leaked that video," he said. "We can't run a mental health organization while being part of a scandal about betrayal." His communications director hesitated. "Phil, people are already saying you leaked it." The room fell silent. He looked up slowly, disbelief etched across his face. "Me? They think you did it to defend yourself. That you felt attacked and wanted the public to see how she spoke to you." He leaned back in his chair, eyes unfocused. "That's absurd," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew how the world worked. The truth mattered less than perception. Once an image took hold online, it became the reality people believed. As the investigation began, more troubling details surfaced. The internal security system had been accessed using credentials belonging to a mid-level operations manager, a man who had resigned 2 weeks earlier after a disagreement about overtime pay. Attempts to contact him failed. He had left the city. Whether he acted alone or under instruction, no one could tell. The mystery only added to the drama. By the end of the week, the story had evolved from a single leaked clip to a full-blown public reckoning. Talk shows debated the ethics of celebrity activism. Newspapers published op-eds titled, "When Image Overshadows Intention," and "The Price of Compassion as Performance." Supporters of Meghan argued that women in power were unfairly scrutinized for showing assertiveness. Critics countered that empathy and ego cannot coexist on the same stage. Through it all, Project Healthy Minds teetered under the weight of scrutiny. Donations paused, sponsors hesitated, and the charity's once inspirational image was replaced by controversy. Shermer gave one short interview days later, his voice measured but weary. "Our mission has always been about authenticity," he said. "What's happening now only reminds us how fragile that word can be." The footage had done more than embarrass two public figures. It had fractured trust, exposed the thin line between advocacy and performance, and left everyone involved trapped in a storm of perception. The gala that was meant to celebrate healing had instead become a mirror reflecting everything fragile about human ambition. By the time the noise began to fade, one truth lingered unshaken. The footage, real or manipulated, had revealed the fault lines that polite applause had hidden. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. Phil Shermer sat in his office long after the city outside had gone quiet. The skyline glowed faintly through the glass. Its lights reflected on the surface of his desk where printouts of emails, press inquiries, and damage assessments were spread in careful disorder. His phone had stopped ringing hours ago, but the silence felt worse than the noise. The organization he had built, his life's work, was now caught in a storm that had nothing to do with mental health and everything to do with reputation. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion turning into an ache that reached his bones. The headlines had been relentless all week. Every variation of the story had painted him differently: hero, villain, victim, opportunist. One tabloid accused him of leaking the footage himself to embarrass Meghan Markle after she allegedly humiliated him backstage. Another called him a scapegoat for a crisis he didn't cause. Somewhere between those extremes, the truth had become irrelevant. In the privacy of his thoughts, he replayed the moment on that stage. Meghan accepting the award, her speech polished and commanding. Harry standing beside her, eyes flicking toward the crowd, unsure. Shermer had smiled, congratulated them, and stepped aside for the cameras. He remembered the faint sting of irritation that came with realizing the charity's message. His message had been eclipsed by spectacle. That irritation was followed by guilt. Was it vanity? Or was it simply the frustration of watching years of sincere effort become a backdrop for someone else's story? Now, those feelings had turned into fuel for endless speculation. In the eyes of the public, motive was everything. They wanted a reason why a man known for empathy might let something so explosive reach the world. The problem was, Phil couldn't answer that question, not even for himself. He hadn't leaked the footage, but he understood why people believed he might have. The optics were too perfect. A CEO overshadowed by celebrity. A quiet resentment mistaken for revenge. The story wrote itself. Across the room, the television on mute replayed the same footage for the 1000th time. Meghan's gestures looked sharper under fluorescent light. Harry's silence seemed heavier. Shermer stared at his own image in the background of the clip, his body half-turned, caught between calm professionalism and discomfort. He hated that image. It made him look passive, cornered. And yet, it wasn't entirely false. He remembered that conversation vividly. Meghan had approached him minutes after leaving the stage, her communications manager beside her. She was polite at first, then firm, then visibly frustrated. The issue, as she described it, was about the timing of her speech and the lighting that had allegedly made her appear off-tone on camera. Shermer had tried to explain that the production schedule was fixed, that technical adjustments mid-event could cause chaos. But the discussion escalated faster than he expected. By the time Harry stepped in quietly to de-escalate, the air had already gone cold. The words she used were not cruel, but they were cutting. "If your organization can't manage presentation consistency," she had said, "it undermines credibility for both of us." She wasn't wrong, but the tone struck him. It was the way she said "both of us," as though her brand and his mission existed on equal footing, as if Project Healthy Minds had become a prop in her narrative. That moment stayed with him long after the gala ended. When the footage leaked, that conversation played in his mind on a loop. Not because he was angry, but because it forced him to confront something he'd been avoiding for years, the creeping transformation of advocacy into performance. He'd built his organization to be about authenticity, vulnerability, truth. But the higher they climbed in visibility, the more those ideals bent under the weight of sponsorships, branding, and celebrity collaborations. His communications director interrupted his thoughts the next morning, sliding a stack of reports onto his desk. "We're hemorrhaging partnerships," she said bluntly. 3 donors have paused funding pending the investigation. 2 others want public clarification that we had no involvement in the leak. Phil nodded, flipping through the pages. "And the staff? They're split," she replied. "Some think it's best to stay silent until things cool down. Others want you to make a direct statement defending yourself. Everyone's tired, Phil." He exhaled slowly. "They have a right to be." Silence settled between them before she added, "Do you think it's her team behind the leak?" He looked up sharply. "No," he said. Then softer, "At least I hope not." That possibility haunted him. If Meghan's team had leaked it as part of a controlled narrative, perhaps to paint themselves as victims of an internal breach, then the situation was even darker than he imagined. But there was no evidence, just speculation. Every scenario made someone look guilty. Every explanation looked like spin. That night, he met with the board of directors in an emergency session. The mood was grim. Some members were sympathetic. Others were quietly furious. "This is unacceptable," one said. "We've lost control of our public image. You need to distance yourself immediately. Issue a statement clarifying that this had nothing to do with Project Healthy Minds leadership." Phil listened, his fingers pressed together, his mind drifting between practicality and principle. "If I do that," he said finally, "I'm throwing my staff under the bus. Whoever leaked it might have been careless, not malicious. And besides, this isn't about one video anymore. It's about trust." One board member leaned forward. "Trust doesn't matter if the organization collapses." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Then maybe we're not the organization I thought we were." After the meeting, he walked through the empty halls of the office, the soft hum of servers the only sound. He paused near the wall of photographs. Images from past events, smiling faces of volunteers, survivors who had found help through the programs they built. He lingered on one photo, a small community forum from years earlier, long before the gala nights and luxury sponsorships. It reminded him why he had started all of this in the first place. He whispered to himself, "We used to care about people, not impressions." Over the next few days, he worked tirelessly to stabilize the organization. He held meetings with donors, reached out to sponsors, and reassured staff. Publicly, he maintained composure. Privately, he was unraveling. Every article questioning his motives cut deeper than he admitted. He knew he couldn't afford emotional collapse. Irony would kill him, but sleep eluded him. His inbox filled with advice, threats, and requests for interviews. Everyone wanted him to play a part in a narrative he never asked to star in. Then came the tipping point. A journalist published an exposé titled, "The Man Behind the Footage." Did Phil Shermer leak it to save his reputation? The article was full of conjecture, citing anonymous insiders who claimed he had expressed frustration with the Sussex's dominance at the event. The piece painted him as a calculating executive tired of being overshadowed by celebrity partners. The damage was instant. Online discussions turned against him. Comments accused him of hypocrisy, of betraying his own values. Within hours, hashtags demanding his resignation trended. The irony stung. A man who spent years advocating for compassion was now being dissected by strangers who knew nothing about him beyond a viral clip. He stared at the article headline for a long time before closing his laptop. The silence of his office pressed down on him. For the first time in years, he wondered if the work was worth it. He had built something beautiful out of pain and hope, only to watch it crumble under the weight of perception.